Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own Bird Undead or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by the avid reader _ sometimes writer, and you can find the link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by Angela.
Bird Undead, Chapter 3. A fighter, not a fixer. Abigail's the first awake, and it's becoming their norm. The tent of sticks is still standing, where she'd left it set up not far from her feet. It remains unburned. Her plan to make a fire for them, like the last 2 nights, had been forgotten as soon as Rael had spoken. Thankfully, the night hadn't caused the temperature to drop too much since the blonde still had her strike jacket. And no matter how cold it gets, she won't be asking for it back. Not when she knows that Rael needs it more. She decides to wait until the dawn fades completely into blue skies before trying to get them moving again. Abigail hopes that they're close. They have to be. They've walked so far and the blonde needs help from an actual fixer or two, not a blaster turned barely passable field medic. She's not at all equipped for this, and they have no supplies at all either. They'd made the hopefully not fatal mistake of stowing their gear bags in the bed so they could buckle in for the takeoff before the little boy got spooked, and the soft, selfless shitbird that is Rael Collar went after him and gave him her lucky bowerbird charm. Coincidentally, the sword had actually pierced right through the exact spot the charm is always fastened to in the lapels of Rael's jackets. The irony isn't lost on Abigail, who makes a mental note to never allow her companion to take it off ever again, no matter where they were. Not even within the general safety of the walls of Fort Salem from now on, since her unit mate is such a trouble magnet. The Bellwethers have never been the type to take much stock in the superstition that surrounds battle charms until now, believing in themselves and the confidence they have in their abilities instead. Bellwethers don't run, they don't hide, they don't give up, and they don't fail, fighting to the very end, be that of their opponent or themselves. They don't need some hocus-pocus good luck charm. Well, hocus-pocus her ass. Fake magic, it was clearly not. Even if she doesn't know what kind of work it actually must be, she'll have to ask Rael. Lesson learned. No need for a repeat to test it again. She's a quick study, and she's going to find a way to attach the damn thing to its owner's very skin, if she has to. Never again. That pin is never allowed to leave its owner ever again. Not as long as the stubborn little blonde lives and continues to serve. Rael doesn't even twitch when the blaster finally untangles their fingers to free her hand, and is much harder to gently shake awake today compared to the last 2 days. It makes the taller girl worry greatly. She doesn't need to be a fixer to know that it can't be a good sign. It's definitely not a promising start to the day. Her smaller companion eventually starts to stir at her urging, but she's sluggish and lethargic. Abigail drops back into a kneel by the blonde's side, after dispersing the unused sticks and leaves back into the trees, and puts a hand on her shoulder to keep her on her back with a soft shushing noise. "It's okay. Hang on. Let me look at you, Collar. Just help me a little," she murmurs, pushing a stray strand of dull blonde hair out of the fixer's face. The ends is a tired hum of acceptance, while the blaster makes quick word of the jacket's fastening, so she can survey the damage done to her companion by the very sword that's held across her back by her belt. Rael helps her to free a pale left arm from its sleeve as much as she can, and again when the taller girl pushes her carefully over onto her right side. Abigail scoots closer to keep the blonde braced against her hip so she doesn't have to try to keep herself balanced. She investigates the entry wound on the fixer's back, relieved to find it unchanged and still remarkably almost entirely healed. The thick scabbing over it looks like it's almost ready to start to peel off on its own, like it would be if left alone naturally. That's good. That means that it's more than likely the problem child, that is, the half of the stab wound where the blade had protruded through the smaller girl's chest. Great, that's where all the important organs are. Not like we need those. Abigail sighs and moves back to gently lower Rael back down onto her back again. Easy shit, Bird. Your back is fine. I just have to look at that hole you got in your chest in the 2 seconds that my back was turned. She soothes at the quiet noise the blonde makes when she settles back against the leaves below her again and tries to make a joke to get her companion to react. She doesn't like how shaky and strangled the smaller girl's breathing sounds right now. The fixer huffs in a way that sounds like the first note of a chuckle and opens her eyes to look blearily up at her. It's not my fault. He decided I have such a stabbable looking back, Bells. Rael wheezes in return, clearly struggling to get the air required to speak. Good to see those blues, Color. Don't talk, but try to keep your eyes open on me. Okay? Here, just keep moving your fingers or something so I know you're still with me while I look at your exit wound. Abigail agrees, feeling slightly better at her companion having finally opened her eyes, and taking the blonde's left hand and resting it against the taller girl's knee and lower thigh. Okay, her smaller counterpart agrees, starting to alternate between soft series of taps and tracing random patterns over the slightly coarse fabric of the blaster strike pants where her hand had been left. What did I just say? Abigail scolds gently, unable to stop the way her eyes roll, nor the pull of a small smile when a shape that is unmistakably a K is traced onto her leg. Glad to see your sass is still intact at least, she chuckles, getting a clear heart-shaped trace onto her pants next. The blaster pulls at the rip in her companion's shirt from the sword and frowns when she sees the injury. It's only barely starting to scab, and the skin around it is pink that's slowly starting to look closer to red, and it's not a stain from the blood either. The discolored skin goes out in a patch almost half an inch out in all directions from the edges of the wound, and it's warmer than the pale skin around it when she ghosts her finger over it. Rael inhales sharply when she touches the edge of the patch of skin lightly with her full fingertip, and starts back up on the tapping against her leg. You okay? Abigail asks, looking for blue irises in case the resumed taps were to get her attention. Hurts, her companion huffs, not stopping her gentle rhythm. I am sorry. I have to touch it one more time and then we'll be done. And we'll need to try to get moving. If it's really bad, I don't mind if you need to dig your nails into my leg, the taller girl warns apologetically, watching as the blonde swallows hard and seems to raise herself before giving her a single nod to proceed. The taps against her leg come faster and feel more anxious as she turns her attention back to her investigation. The blaster apologizes silently again before gently touching closer to the redder skin around the edge of the stab, keeping her touch light. Rael whimpers from low in her throat, and her entire body seems to twitch and flinch. The hand at her leg is gripping the hem at the outside of her thigh tightly and tugging at it gently. Okay, that's all. I'm sorry, but I'm done, I promise. It looks irritated and like it might be starting to become infected, and we don't have anything to treat that. Fuck, we don't even have bandages, and I'd rip a strip off my shirt, but I'm worried about introducing new germs to the area since it's about as clean as yours, just with less blood. Is it okay if I cut a bit of a bigger gap in your shirt to try to keep the dried blood away better? Not much bigger, Abigail reassures before asking, her hand now moving up to run through sweaty blonde hair comfortingly, while the fixer recovers from the pain she's inflicted. Not great. Yeah. Good idea. The blonde agrees through a wince. The taller girl pulls the hooked Camarilla dagger off of where she tucked the hilt into one of her belt loops, and uses it to slowly cut the tear by almost an inch at both the top and bottom. She's exceptionally careful to keep the metal from touching any part of the skin, and her modification keeps the fabric from sticking to the skin again. I am going to do one more thing, but this one won't hurt, she decides, after looping the knife back where she'd had it. Rael looks at her with wary confusion, but Abigail doesn't answer the silent question those eyes are asking her, already knowing what the blonde is going to say about her plan. She gently pulls the hand still loosely holding the hem of her pant leg free and holds it between both of her own, before thinking better of it. She lowers one hand, wrapping it around a pale wrist to stop the inevitable attempt to pull away as soon as the fixer realizes what she's doing. No. There it is. Don't even try it, Color. I'm going to do this whether you like it or not, and you're in no state to stop me at the moment. So shut up and sit still so I can focus and try to help you, the blaster growls in warning, opening her eyes to lock with the wintry blue of her stubborn companion. The smaller girl has her mouth pressed into a hard line, her displeasure clear. But her eyes tell Abigail that as much as she doesn't like it, she knows that Abigail is right, and she definitely doesn't like it. Not one bit. The taller girl isn't fond of the idea either, not by any stretch of the imagination, but she needs to try to fix Rael again if they have any hope of her being able to cover the ground they need to today. She's a bellwether. She can handle a bit of pain if it means she can get them to help and possibly safety sooner. Abigail exhales deeply and closes her eyes again, the hand around her companion's wrist seeking out the pulse point there with 2 fingers and pressing them against it. She focuses on trying to sync their heart rates and does her best to do the same for their breathing next. The link finally opens between them again after a few minutes, much to the blaster's relief, and she's instantly hit with fragments of memories. She can only make out a few, intrigued to see the goodbye Anacostia had given the rest of her unit while she was arguing with her mother. She feels the injured girl's pain in her own chest, prodding at the source through their connection. Fuck, the fixer grunts in pain, her voice tight and her eyes squeezing shut when the taller girl does so. Abigail can miss it when the link between them lights up with the blinding pain she's caused again at the same time as the curse falls from the blonde, and she's quickly to send an apology silently through the bond. Thankfully, she doesn't need to do it a second time, receiving all of the information she'd needed on the first try. She's again confirmed that the sword hadn't caused any injury to the fixer's spine, and that the entry point was almost fully healed. It'll probably be completely done by the time this try is finished. It's a small mercy. She's also reconfirmed that the blade had somehow also missed Rael's heart by no more than a hair. She's sure that's what the man had been aiming for, and he'd come too close to hitting his target for comfort, in her opinion. The problem, though, is what he did hit, that being the blonde's left lung. The sword had entered clean through it, but the curve of the tip had ripped back through the frontmost side jaggedly before it was unintentionally corrected while it was being pulled out with that horrible wet noise. The slice at the back wall of the lung has healed at the same progression as the entry wound, but the front tear is proving to be harder and more delicate, so stubborn in its difficulty to be healed. That might be on Abigail's own unfamiliarity with fixing, and her clear ineptitude with it at least halfway, maybe more. And she's starting to think that one of the remaining 8ths of the blame is on the fact that Rael might just be so stubborn that it can be found all the way down to a cellular level. Well, that might be funny in almost any other setting. It's wreaking havoc now and might just kill her if they don't get help soon. The last 8 of the blame belongs solidly to the blaster's growing theory that her companion's unconscious mind might just be so used to her passively suicidal tendencies and ideations that isn't triggered Rael's own work to want to engage correctly and help Abigail fix the damage like it's supposed to. Like she really needs to. If her rudimentary understanding of the fixing work's applicable theory is right, and she's almost certain it should be, Rael's ability to work should be firing up and connecting with Abigail's in response to an outside fixing work to work together to heal. That's almost half of what makes fixing even possible, and also why it takes so much more out of a witch who tries to heal a civilian the same way. That's why she finds it so remarkable that Rael can do with no apparent problems on both civilians and witches alike, aside from taking whatever she's fixed onto herself, at least partially. While Abigail was not a fixer, and had only passed Isidore's emergency aid exam, like they'd been required to by the skin of her teeth, it hadn't stopped her from reading up on the basics and different techniques and applicable theories to appreciate the blonde's inherent skill at it. The smaller girl has a gift. It just can't help her now. Unfortunately, you can't fix yourself, no matter how skilled of a fixer you might be. It takes 2 witches minimum to even achieve only a partial success. The patient, who supplies their work even when unconscious or otherwise incapacitated, and the fixer, who controls and uses that augmented power boost of their work to take care of any damage done to the patient. That's one thing that's known and understood as a rule of thumb across the board and the different specialities you can test and train for. The fixer's curse. She's heard it called by one of her cousins when her unit mate, her sister, and their coven's fixer had been killed in combat from an injury too grave and too advanced for any of her non-fixer sisters to heal. Back to the problem at hand. The torn tissue is delicate and was torn raggedly, leaving jagged edges that are much more of a task to try to mend than a clean slice. It's thankfully starting to knit back together from the inside out under her repeated attempts to fix Raelle and alleviate some of the pain. But it's a slow process due to the complexity and her less than novel skill level, especially since the wound has evidently decided it'll only allow itself to be healed from the entry point to the exit point, not simultaneously like it should, and it's sticking to its guns on that choice. So stubborn it can even be found in the very cells that she's made of. Abigail is more and more sure of the truth of that statement each time she tries this. Okay, I can do this. Not well, but I can do it. I have to. She mutters to herself as she takes a deep breath and starts to emit a high-pitched whir of a seed like she'd been taught. Raelle's hand squeezes hers in encouragement, and it helps her feel more confident in her ability to pull this off. The blaster does her best to visualize what needs to happen, what she needs to fix, while pulling the initial burst of resistance that the body naturally tries to emit at her foreign energy out through her connected hands and into herself. She grits her teeth at the ripping pain that burns across the already torn skin of her chest from times prior, her flesh tearing itself apart for every inch of success she manages to drag kicking and screaming out of Raelle's wound. She fights for every layer of skin she's able to carefully knit back together, sweat starting to bead on her forehead and run in rivulets down her back. She can do this. She can take it. Abigail won't give up yet, wanting, no, needing to fix as much of it as she can, so they'll be able to move again today and to spare Raelle of some of the suffering it puts her battered body through to do so. Abby. Bells. Stop. Stop. If you don't slow down and break the link soon, you're going to pass out or worse, and you're too tall and I'm too hurt for me to be able to carry you anywhere. I don't even know in which direction we need to go in, the blonde reminds him, warning, squeezing her hand again to get the taller girl's attention. Her breathing is steadier, and her voice is significantly stronger and less of a wheeze now. Abigail is doing it. Just a little more, I can take just a little more, the blaster says through gritted teeth, and shakes her head, squeezing her shut eyes even tighter. She's almost finished mending the tissue of the left lung. She's so close, just a few more layers, when she starts to sway. She's dizzy, and suddenly the hand she's been holding to maintain the link is ripped out of her grip. There's a quiet groan and a rustle of the leaves in front of her, and soft hands cupping her face are what stopped the swaying and settled the dizziness. Bellwether, open your eyes. Look at me. It'll help. Raelle's voice soothes. Still weaker than normal, but so much better than it had been when she'd woken up. Abigail exhales slowly, trying to catch her breath while she does as the blonde asked, and slowly starts to blink her eyes open. It takes a minute for her eyes to finally focus and things to stop being so dreadfully blurry. But when they finally do, she's nearly lost in the cool blue of a crisp winter sky. It takes her breath away, and her face must show it because Raelle only laughs softly. Hey there, you're so fucking stubborn. You know that, and I'm the reckless one. You almost just make yourself pass out, you idiot, with that goddamn bellwether pride. When I tell you to stop, you need to listen to me. I'm the fixer here. I know how to do what you're doing better than you. Jesus. If you do that again, I am not going to let you keep trying to fix me. Hell, we're so worn out as it is. You shouldn't keep trying to fix me at all. Not on such an empty stomach and without any water nearby. It takes a toll on your body to fix, especially an injury as complex as mine, the blonde scolds firmly when the taller girl can finally recognize the rest of her face as well. The blaster feels her face flush, with not so much shame as embarrassment in response, doing her best to duck her head away from the now piercing blue eyes. Sorry. Can I check them again? Please? I'm all done with trying to fix while the sun is up, I swear, Abigail requests, hesitantly trying to meet her smaller companion's eyes again. The fixer seems to search her eyes and face for something for a long moment before withdrawing her hands and nodding her acceptance. The entry point on Riel's back has returned to being unmarked pale skin, only leaving the thinnest pale pink scar that sits flush with the skin around it. It's slightly more rubbery to the touch, the blaster notes to herself as she runs her finger over it curiously for a few seconds. The taller girl quickly finishes checking it and pulls back to search for its evil twin on the blonde's chest. She's intrigued to see how well she did as she moves the torn hole in her companion's shirt enough to survey her handiwork. The exit stab is still open and reddish around the edges, but it looks shallower, even if it's not by much. It's enough to be observable, and the agitated patch of skin surrounding the wound has retreated back and is half the size it had been. Riel hisses in pain and winces with a small flinch when careful fingers gently touch the irritated skin, but she's breathing significantly easier now that her lung is healed almost completely, and that's all that matters to Abigail. We need to move. We lost enough time as it is. I think we're almost there. The unit leader sighs, pushing herself up to her feet unsteadily. Her chest burns and pulls at the motion, warm blood languidly starting to soak into the black fabric of her undershirt for the umpteenth time. Careful, Bells. You're still suffering from the consequences of your ego, and you probably will be for a little bit. I don't know how long it'll last in her current conditions, the blonde warns, rising to her feet more slowly, and is only slightly more balanced when she's gotten there. They steady each other, each girl putting a hand on the other's upper arm, their extended arms crossing over one another. We have to get going. We're burning daylight, shitbird. The blaster urges as soon as she can start to walk without lurching from side to side. The fixer nods, still a bit unsteady when she tries to move closer to the taller girl. Fuck. Everything is blurry and doubled and my head is killing me, Riel sighs in exhausted frustration, coming to a stop. Well, lucky for us, I can still see straight for now. I don't know how long I get to keep it before the dehydration gets as bad as it is for you, but for now I've got this. I've got us. Come on, Abigail says half playfully, trying to keep their mood up while she returns to the blonde's side and pulls her right arm up around the taller girl's shoulders to keep her from stumbling. You've got so many jokes now, Did it really take basically dying for you to finally ease up on that cage you keep your sense of humor in? I would have made an attempt on your life so much sooner if I'd known that's what would finally do it. The fixer teases right back with a grin, taking care to avoid the exposed tip of the Camarilla dagger on the blaster's hip until the other girl notices and quickly refastens it to the opposite hip, within the coil of her scourge instead. Abigail rolls her eyes at the jab as she checks the belt unbuckled diagonally across her chest and makes sure that the sword is nice and secured against her back before they start to walk.
Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own, and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.